Cool. Well, Susan, thank you so much for coming along today. I'm really, really pleased because actually it's a nearly 3 o'clock UK time, but over in Canada, it's quite early. It's about nearly coming up to 10 o'clock. But hey, thank you for joining us so early. Tell us a little bit about you and where you're from and what you do, and just share with us a little bit about this. Yeah, go.
Okay. Yes, I live in Canada in a small town. I'm in the most south point of Canada in Ontario, called Leamington. It's kind of where they make a lot of tomatoes, so I call it Tomato Town. And my partner and I just moved here a couple of years ago, so it was a big shift. It was kind of like a retirement move. But I don't really know what retirement means, and I have a progressive neuromuscular disease, which is probably better known in the UK than here, called Charcot Marie Tooth.
Oh, wow.
But the best way to understand it, most people, if I say muscular dystrophy, they go, oh yeah, I know what that is. But they don't really, but that's okay. So yeah, I live with that. My mother had it, and I have one brother with it and one without. Luck of the draw. And so consequently, because I live with this progressive disease, I figured out early on that in the work world, it's not necessarily welcome. So I had to find a way to make my health condition work for me. So that's why I went into the psychotherapy field. And I specialized working with people with significant illnesses and disability. And, like take, for example, someone that's had a car accident and now becomes a paraplegic.
Yeah.
That's the kind of therapy I do. Or if somebody, is diagnosed with cancer, things like that. Parkinson's, the whole range. And so I worked as a private therapist for a number of years in different venues, universities, hospitals, privately. And also did a fair bit of writing. I've got maybe 4 books under my belt.
Yeah.
And, but they're, if you can't sleep, they're great, but they're not really, anyways. So yeah, I enjoy writing. Writing is something that helps me to make sense of the world. And, but the work that I do, it's interesting because when my health has certainly changed over the years. I walk very little. I use a walker in the home. And I use a scooter for outside, and I love that. Still drive with hand controls. I now require for sure. And yeah, lots of things changed. So yeah, but and it's actually my disability has always been my best teacher, because it reminds me of how fragile life is and how beautiful it is, and the things you can appreciate. Things like when I lost the ability to do up buttons, suddenly buttons were a beautiful thing. Yeah, I do. It's funny. I did a lot of public speaking, inspirational talks and whatnot. And I did one talk called, Be the Button. And it's what I found interesting, though, in thinking about the principle work, the 3 principles, because, my mode of therapy has always been, I think, unique, my own, what have you. But, I do, so I teach self-hypnosis for pain management, some NLP work, some of the usual things that, is helpful in behavior modification type things. And I have a course that I have available online to help people begin the journey, into the accepting their health situation in a way that's positive. But then I came across the principle work through a lovely lady named Molly Gordon, and I follow her blog for years. So, and she did a talk with Judy Segman.
Sedgman, yeah.
Yeah, which was like well, it just really made me, sit up kind of thing. And I thought,
Let me go back to, I guess there's a burning question I have, and that's mostly about kind of what this is about. And this is about kind of the helping people outside of the community understand kind of almost a kind of what we're there for.
mm-hmm.
And behind that, there's a why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, what's your? Do you have a clarity around what your why might be?
Yeah. Well, I've always found that, by helping others, I help myself. It kind of reminds me. So it's, I don't mean to sound selfish, but, it's like when I say helping others, then it causes me to really pull within myself because people do look to me as the example. So then I need to really think about that in a way that's going to be transferable and shareable. So I find the principal conversation is a great way to do that, for sure. And the interesting thing about why, and I love that because that is one of the biggest, most frequent questions that people struggle with when they learn they have a significant illness or an accident, or why me, why, and I used to always say to people, okay, you're not going to get a fax from God or anything that's going to explain that to you. So there's just some things you just will never know, and you need to be comfortable with the not knowing. Because you can only take that so far. Like I can say, well, mine is a genetic disease, so obviously my mother had it, so then I had it. So, there's a bit of why there. Makes sense, DNA and all that kind of thing. But then if you move beyond that, there is no why. It just is, and it's what you do with it, in a sense. And I've never not wanted to have my disability, which I think has been a saving grace for me, because my mother had it, and my mother died when I was very young, when I was 11. So that was very sad, of course. And so my disability almost kept the bond with her. So as I would see my hands deform, I would see hers. So there was a lovely relationship with my disability that actually kept me connected to my late mother.
Mm.
So in that sense, it's always been a very intimate friend, comforting in a way. Doesn't mean I wasn't frustrated by the challenges that the, progression caused, but yeah. So my why is really that it keeps me connected to my mother and the work that I do. And I really, I deeply understand what it feels like. So, where other counselors would tell me, oh, the patients would say, well, you don't know what it's like. Where they can't get away with that with me, right? So, yeah. So that's my why. It's just it keeps me positive about my own situation, and finding the beauty in the smallest things.
Yeah. There's a few things about that. I love the way that you kind of picked up on the beauty of buttons when you lost the ability to do up buttons.
Yeah.
And the connection with your mother as well.
Mm. Yeah.
Which is really the connection with you.
It is, and it's also connection with all people.
That's it. That's true.
Yeah.
That's
that's how I feel. So, being able to really look at the spirit of people, I mean, the outside stuff is just, it's just what it is, but it's really what's inside that matters. I guess that's an old cliche, but, that's, yeah. And one of the other things that people really have a hard time with when they have, deformities in particular is the concern of what people think, what other people think of them, and their whole, all that kind of thing. And so that's something you wrestle with, or at least I wrestled with early on, always being somewhat different in the sense that I walked differently, and schoolyard bullying and all that kind of thing. Wasn't necessarily kind. But you do develop a relationship with yourself. And, I always really tried to lean toward that but certainly have my dark horse days too. But not as many as I used to when I was younger. So.
Yeah, and that's the blessing of this is that we do see the dark horse days just for dark horse days, and it's kind of. I was watching a Garrett Kramer video with I think it was Ankush who was hosting. Watched it yesterday and shared it with a few people, and we when we're on a roller coaster, we kind of see the roller coaster with its ups and downs, and we go and jump on the roller coaster for some fun, recognizing that there are going to be ups and there are going to be downs. And there are going to be bits that we are excited by and bits that we're scared by, and we jump into that roller coaster knowing that's going to happen. Well, we don't do the same with life, and life is exactly the same. We don't expect there to be downs as well as ups, and when you see it as a roller coaster perspective and understand that that's the natural mechanism, and there will be an up the other side of the down.
Yeah.
Let the down be the down. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, on the weekend, my brother, who shares the same disability, we were in a really loud restaurant, and we can't be heard. His voice is even more affected than mine. And so he came out of the restaurant, and he was really grumpy, like, his wife said, "What's up?" And he's we're really mad. He can't talk, and nobody hears him. And he was quite upset. And so we're pretty close, obviously. And so I just kind of reminded him, "Barry, this will pass. So, it will pass. It's a cloud." And then, it seemed to settle him down a bit and remind him, but because I know, there are those frustrations. Yeah. And, the interesting thing about living with significant illness is you really have to learn about allowing other people to help you. There's this whole myth about what independence really means. So when I was younger, it'd be like, "Oh no, don't open the door for me. I'm independent. I can do everything myself." Whereas now, of course, I have to have a lot of help. And so that has really taught me to receive with grace, I guess is how I would put it. Yeah. So I think it's one of the questions when you were saying about the why, one of the other questions that I used to say in some of my talks, one of the most frequent questions I'm asked before even my name is, "What's wrong with me?" And that would be something I remember when I was young, I'd be like so annoyed, kind of thing. But I really got used to it and sort of came to terms with it in the sense that I really got that I don't feel this is a wrong way to be in the world. It's perfectly fine. And so what I would reply to people when they would say, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" I would say, "Well, there's really nothing wrong with me, but I do also have a, disease, blah, blah." Some people get it and some don't. But for me, it was a way of allowing myself to not be, put the disease before myself kind of thing,
Yeah. I absolutely see that. I've done an interview with someone else who has cancer, actually. And I get exactly the same message from her. She's a perfectly healthy, beautiful human being, and she also has cancer. And that's true of everyone. And it's kind of, it's beautiful when they see it, but I recognize that some people won't, and that's okay too.
Yeah, Well, there's a lot of fear surrounded with, any kind of health concerns.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit like what you were saying about the roller coaster, the ups and downs, and realizing that. And it always kind of perplexes me why people think that they will not feel at some point. It's like, well, why did you think you'd be the one that didn't have to deal with this at some point, So it's, yeah.
Great. So your work, I can kind of move on. Your work then is around helping people with similar sort of positions.
Yeah, but it's not always just I tend mostly to work with people with physical illnesses, physical health, not necessarily mental illness, unless of course it crosses over and impacts on the physical issue. So I don't necessarily work with like people with addiction or any of those things, unless of course that is a part of their experience and they also have a physical issue. So yes, I tend to work with people with physical disabilities, illnesses, but it also comes into play because it's usually so much more than that's the real issue, But it's difficult for people to come to terms with their disappointment. I think there's really a deep, deep disappointment that occurs when someone's life is significantly impacted by their health. They can no longer work, they can no longer maintain the identity and the position they once had. It's a very difficult transition.
Yeah. Or it can seem so for them, can't it?
I'm sorry?
Or it can seem so for them, can't it? It can seem like a difficult transition. But because I know somebody who was in our special forces over here, and he fell off a cliff and is paralyzed from the waist down, and he gets on with life just like no difference.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because I would work with clients that would, some people might have just a little tiny limp, and then suddenly they are the most dark person.
Yeah.
And then you'd have someone like your friend that's paraplegic and just getting on with it, and I just think, wow, what makes that difference? And really it just comes down to where your thoughts are thinking and all that kind of thing. Mean making, I call it mean making, I can't walk, therefore I can't be a man, was I remember one man client saying to me, things like that. Yeah, it's the mean making,
I like that. I like that.
Well, it's, we all make that up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, it's mean making.
Yeah.
Defines me. My thoughts around the situation define me.
So I try to encourage people to sort of mentally take a step back and see that they're the ones doing the thinking there,
Yeah.
So, that's the important thing, is always coming back to yourself and seeing, that, there's so much, I love the way that the 3 principle points out about the mind and how, the trees grow, and there's so much we don't understand, but we know, there's that part of our brain that we know something, and then there's the part that we know we don't know. And then there's another big part that we don't even know we don't know. So it's just being comfortable with that. And I was thinking once back to a time when I was in university studying, one of my courses was psychology of religion. And I thought, well, I should take that course because maybe I'll have clients with different religions, so I better learn about them. But the course wasn't about that at all. It was more about your relationship with religion. And it was really interesting because we had a lovely professor, an older Jewish gentleman. And the first day he asked everyone in the class, well, what does religion mean to you? And my last name beginning with W, I was near the end. So I was listening to all these people, come with amazing things about, angels and God and any number of things that they were saying. And then he came to me and he said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I don't think you're going to like what I think. And he said, well, what is it? And I said, I think we just all make it up because we're so uncomfortable not knowing that people need to have something to grab hold of and have some structure, And so he called that Susan's theory. But, I felt like, to me, I paralleled it to my disability because that's that whole why, coming back to the why thing, I have an understanding that we can't know everything. We don't have to make sense of everything, but we need to still embrace it and experience it, and the feeling of it. The hardest part of working with people is when they deal with deep physical pain. Pain is painful. No matter what you think about it, it still hurts, and there'll be lots of times when I'll have very bad pain days. And, I try to really lean into it. Like when you try to run away from it, it just hurts more. Whereas if I, really kind of lean into it and really feel it. So, for example, say my left ankle is hurting. So I will really try to connect with that ankle in a deep way. And then by thinking about it in a very loving and comforting way, it just helps to settle it down ever so much. And when you have a lot of pain, that little ever so much makes a big difference. And reminding myself that it will shift. It will get better. It will lessen. May not like get better in terms of cure or whatever. Like, a lot of people get hung up on that cure thing.
Yeah. Susan, I need to know a little bit more about that. Share a little bit more about leaning in and the sort of embracing of the pain, or the connecting more with where that's coming from and what
if you think of
happens during that process.
If you think about what I was saying about my hands and how they deformed, and I would visually see my mother, kind of, and then that created a lovely bond, lovely feeling, certainly lessened my disappointment with my hands. I mean, I used to type with 10 fingers, now I use 3, they don't all come to the party anymore. But when there's a lot of pain, it's going back to that relationship with yourself. I remember not so long ago, my aunt said to me, when we were talking about whatever pain thing I was having at the time, and she said, "You must be so mad at your foot." And I thought that was quite humorous. And I said, well, no, I'm not mad at my foot at all. And if anything, I'm being compassionate to it and, really trying to love it and be gentle and pay attention. I need to do this more to be more attentive to the treatment. But when there is a lot of deep pain, I just, I relax. I try to do a lot of self-hypnosis in terms of calming. Like the most important thing is to calm down. And I heard Judy say that on one of her videos about calming down, how much big difference that made for people that were dealing with a business problem. And it was like, yeah, because there's something about calming down will lift me up, so it's that roller coaster thing again, so if I just calm down, then some of the lifting up can happen.
It's interesting. I was curious about the pain dimension. I'm really glad you sort of put it in terms of the calming. A lot of what I do, recognizing kind of where I am with people, is helping them slow down. And one of the first things I share with them is how to listen.
How to listen to themselves or other people.
That's it. Yeah. Well, first of all, it starts with how to listen to other people. And then it sort of progresses into, okay, so, listening with nothing on your mind is not just about listening to the other person with nothing on your mind. It's also listening to you with nothing on your mind.
Yeah. Well, and on days when I would have bad pain, I'd be, I could stress and think, oh, but I've got a meeting and I've got this to write and this project will now be on hold. And like my podcast that I started in February, so it was scheduled to go in March, and then I had a very serious leg wound that really knocked the socks off me, quite literally, and grounded me for a while. And where I would, you could very easily go into this whole mindset of, oh, there it is again, it's ruining my life, and all of these things. I mean, there's so many things you can, the dark horse would love to like just take right over, but so then it's a time to remind myself, like I'll be laying in bed and be thinking about how much I love my room and how lovely it is, just noticing, the carpet or something, just things that are right there in front of you. And, my partner bringing me a cup of tea without even asking, that kind of thing. And just noticing how the kindness of other people, how they really want to help you to feel better, so it's a time of, so the projects and everything stops for a while. And rather than stressing about it, I just try to then now go into this other relationship that needs my attention. So
What's occurring to me there is I'm wondering if that's ever not the case.
if that's ever not the case?
Yeah, like that, not in any derogatory way or anything like that, recognizing that it's almost always, I find it almost always, the relationship with me always needs attention.
That's true. That's true. But it can be a little different when it's, very threatening to health in a way. For example, with my leg, I've been told that things like, I hope you don't lose your feet, because the muscles that operate the veins and whatnot are progressing. So I have to be extremely careful. And so all of those very fearful thoughts were showing up in my mind. Very, over this last little bump, I call it. Yeah. And I was really felt very shaken by it. And I just let that be, it's like I allowed myself to feel a little shaken. Okay, this is how you're feeling, it's a valid fear. It is a valid fear. But, how long do you want to stay there? So I acknowledge it with myself. I validate, I do all those good things. But, and then I get in the game and I say, how long do I want to feel this way? What can I do to help, lessen this deep fear? Who can I reach out to? That kind of thing. But the fear is very seductive. You can go right down into a cesspool there.
Yeah.
It's like a swamp. You could just like fall right into that.
Yeah. So Susan, I have no idea about the sort of things that you're going through, both the physical ailments and also the way that it kind of plays with your thinking. No idea about that. And I'm really curious, without wanting to sound disrespectful of kind of what you're going through, I'm just curious if that's any different to any other fears you might have about, I don't know whether you have children. Do you have children?
No, okay. I don't.
People that you're close to, for instance. Is that the feeling you get about kind of your personal health and those things that you confront yourself with clearly the stuff that you've going on from a physical perspective, whether that's any different from maybe the worry about money or the worry about world peace or the worry about
Exactly. It's exactly the same. It's just a little. It's something I can see and touch, but it's exactly the same. And because there's obviously a lot of bad things are happening in the world these days, and you can't help not feel it, and the fear that it happens because of that. But then it's also realizing that there's it's a part of the life. It's the roller coaster.
Sure.
There's so much that you have to really be careful about. Well, it's the same. It's a good parallel with health, because obviously there's many things you need to do to help take care of yourself. And there are many things in the world of these bad things happening that, we need to pay attention to see what role can we do? What part can we play to help, make a shift there?
Yeah.
So it's much the same.
Yeah, and I guess the reason for me pulling it up is that, the thing I see about you is that, okay, you've got this illness that could so easily define you.
Oh, yes.
But looking at Susan right now, right here, it's not.
No, definitely. It's never defined me. And I think, I had a doctor once say to me, it's as if you don't think you're disabled. And I said, I don't. That's just a word, but it can mean so much to people, and it's what you make it mean. I have a disability, but that doesn't mean I am disabled.
Yeah.
It's two different things. Some people say, oh, that's just wordsmithing. No, it's not.
Yeah. Michael Neal once said that, and I saw this instantly. He said, the prognosis is not, but the diagnosis is not a prognosis.
Yeah. And, that's a lot of the struggle people that I work with feel, because a lot of people can't find out what's wrong with them, what's causing their issue. And my particular disease, Charcot Marie Tooth, it took years and years for us to find out what it really was, because I was born in the 50s, so knowledge wasn't what it was. My mother was told she had polio, which clearly she didn't. As a child, I found it really curious, like, why was I always going to the doctor? I felt fine. It was always just for tests and stuff. But I felt fine. I was running around, falling, and just being a kid. But and then when there was a name, I could see my mother's distress over all this. Then when we finally had a name for the disease, nothing changed. I didn't walk any better. Just had a new name, So I just, yeah. So the prognosis is, the diagnosis is definitely not the prognosis, but it can be.
Yeah.
But, it's like a lot of things, and it's a good way to think about it in terms of, the money and other things that are other life things. All of that can define you, all of it. And it's really a matter of, like, I find it really interesting. I can never get away with pretending I'm not disabled, because it's just so obvious. So it's something that it's just there, so I can never, it's a big part of who I am. It's as important to me as being a woman, because that's it. It's there. So I like to make it mine, So, yeah. And I long ago gave up thinking about what, other people thought about it or whatnot. That's really not an issue. It's more important what I think, of course. So that's the kind of things I try to impress upon with my clients, helping them to reconnect with themselves, really.
Yeah.
And sometimes they didn't even have that connection in the first place.
What do you mean?
Well, sometimes people are just so unaware of who they really are and what they think. And suddenly this big thing happens in their life, and they're like completely thrown for a loop because they don't have anything to fall back on. So they have to not just reconnect, they got to rebuild.
Yeah, the calibration goes way out, doesn't it? They thought they were calibrated, and now they're back in touch with something that's true.
Mm. Mm.
I see truth.
Well, and they tend to think that it's bigger than themselves now, when the reality was it always was.
Yeah, yeah,
They just now know it.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, every day we wake up, it's really a miracle. You know, we don't know. Like, you think about the computer and you think, wow, it's interesting how a computer works. It's really just zeros and ones. And it can do all these fascinating things like record us from halfway around the world. And we don't know how it works, but we know we love it. We like it. So it's the same as with us. You know, we wake up every morning and all these molecules and things are happening. You don't wake up and say, how are you doing today, spleen? You know, it's there though.
Yeah. So it's running through my head then as you were showing that. Actually, my background is in engineering. I kind of actually happen to know how all this stuff works. So it's kind of depressing in a way.
Mm.
Well, it's not. I do know how it works, and I kind of can make the best of it. But it's also a little bit of a burden because I kind of get thrown into, Dad, fix this, fix this, Dad, fix this, which is useful. It's useful. Actually, no, it's very useful.
Very useful, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's people like with science backgrounds. Like my partner has a science background. She's a retired veterinarian. And so, you know, she'll come with me to my doctor's appointments and they'll talk about things I don't even have, words I can't even pronounce, and I don't care to, you know, and try to make sense of things. And,
Stop.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Mm.
That's neat.
But I'm coming up with I wanted to come up with something really significant this year because I'm going to be turning 60. Hard to believe I ever got to be 60, but so it's going to be exciting for me. And a lot of women are like, oh, I don't want to be 60. I'm like, no way, man, I'm loving it because it's like I'm here. So, and because of my health being where it's at now, I mean, I'm really struggling to keep walking. So I'm trying to find, so I've come up with this project I'm gonna sort of kick off called 60 at 60. And for 60 weeks, I'm going to try and do like an exercise regime, which would be challenging for me. So it's kind of like playing with my beliefs about my own restrictions, I guess. You know, it's progressive, and when you live with the word progressive in the medical world, it's not the same as in the other world, because progressive means it's getting worse. So I want to kind of try and see if I can, make a crack in that. So that's my goal for 60 is to work on a project that's going to work toward that, trying to find that sliver,
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I wish you every success in that. Please keep us updated how that works.
Well, I'm going to try to invite other people into it.
Yeah.
Because, we all have something that we want to kind of make a shift in. And I think 60 weeks really working on something's got to make some kind of difference.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I like that. So actually, you mentioned your radio show, and you're going to build it into the radio show as well. Actually, tell us a little bit about the radio show for those that are listening to this. So.
Okay. Well, it's called Living Well Today, and it's on our website is livingwelltoday.ca because I'm in Canada.
It's also on iTunes as well, isn't it?
Sorry,
it's also on iTunes as well?
Yes, it's on iTunes. It'll be on Stitcher and all the regular online platforms. But it's also going to be reviewed by the Canadian community radio stations because I formerly did a show with them a number of years ago. So they're encouraging me to do something again. So I'll be submitting it to them, and they've already shown a fair bit of interest. So, and the conversations, Living Well Today, well, I'll be talking with people that are really, in the know. They're coping and, really living well with whatever is happening with them. And I think my goal in that, in the conversation, is because bringing in the three principle conversation and helping people to really think about what they're thinking, and, it's interesting because like with the three principle, from my understanding, is that, you recognize you're going to have these thoughts, like I had mentioned with the blood flow. They're just going to go in, you can't stop your thinking. Oh, don't think that. Well, it will show up anyways. So it's a matter of how much do you want to grab onto it? And it's like, I think I was writing the other day, just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. So we make it all up. It's me making. So it's really important when you are dealing with a health issue to really pay attention to what you make things mean. Yeah. So those are the kinds of things we'll have on the podcast radio show. And there's also, some interesting articles on the blog. And I do my SusanWheelerHall.com is where I do most of my counseling work, and I offer an online course, and I use my cartoons a lot to kind of sprinkle up.
Just bring up your cartoons so
you
can see it. And describe a little bit.
Well, that's definitely me on the scooter, and that's my partner Jan walking with me, and I've just made us into cartoon characters. And then what I do is I'll talk about a topic that's maybe difficult. Like I just wrote a blog post about my recent health bump with this leg wound, and so we're in the cartoon, and there's always I love making the cartoons because it really helps me to tell a story in one picture, and I don't know. So yeah, it's great fun for me. So I enjoy that. So it's kind of a nice way to bring in something a little light with a topic that might be less than light.
Yeah, neat. Very neat. The bit that I like about this work is that it's actually all fun. Once you kind of get into it, it's all sort of fun. And I don't have any stuff that I don't think is fun anymore. Even doing my business expensive actually sounds fun. It's actually sort of fun now.
Oh wow, that's great.
The bizarrest thing, accounts can be fun. They can be fun.
So what do you think accounts for that shift?
What do I think accounts for that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I'll say they're fun, but interestingly, I will put them off.
Mm.
And when I'm doing them, they're still fun. I'll still take pride and effort and throw myself at doing them in the best way I possibly can. And the shift, I don't know, not having anything on it anymore.
Mm. So taking all that meaning off, like I don't want to do it, it's boring. Yeah,
I've got nothing on anything these days. I have very little opinion about anything. And then when I do get an opinion, I drop it in a heartbeat, and it's just not there. And I've got so much more time on my hands. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot views and opinions. They'll get you every time. Everyone's got them. So yeah. When I work with different clients and they're concerned about things like, say for example, you have a gentleman that now can't work in the same way, so he can't provide for his family,
Mm-hmm.
And all that responsibility and all of those really, really heavy things. So it's sort of almost like I always think of it like it's a big puzzle. I'm looking at each piece with the same lens. Not with a different lens, but with the same lens. Who do I want to be in this puzzle? In this particular piece. So I always come back to that, like, who do I want to be? And then from there, because I know I make everything up, I try to lean toward my happy cat.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's interesting. I come across my behavior one day just wasn't very helpful with something. I can't remember what it was. And I suddenly saw myself with a particular type of behavior that I realized just wasn't helpful.
Mm.
And it just suddenly struck me that actually I'd rather not have this behavior.
Mm.
And it dropped instantly.
Yeah, once you kind of notice it.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. I find it fascinating that, to catch ourselves like that. I really love when that happens. And I'll ask myself, is this really serving me?
Yeah. The bizarre thing was that became a complete life lesson to me.
Mm.
And it's something that I kind of share sometimes with clients, is that, kind of just notice the behavior you're having. And is it a helpful behavior or an unhelpful behavior?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's unhelpful behavior, it's likely you've got some thinking on something you might not be seeing right now.
Yeah.
And where would you rather be?
Well, even some of the readings that I've done with the principles with people working with addiction and different mental health issues, and the fascinating and quick shift they can have.
Yeah.
It's like once you get that glimpse of that clarity, it's hard not to see it again.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating, and I've found the principle work has made just so much sense to me. And not sense in the sense that like 1 and 1 is 2, but it just speaks to me in the way that there's more of a feeling, more of the knowing feeling thing.
Yeah.
That just sits right and just feels good, and allows life to be, and just allows all of it, not just the good bits. And that's what I really try to work with people to realize, is that, like what you're saying about the roller coaster, there are going to be some bad bits in this game of health. So, who do you want to be in that when you're in that place? Because you're going to be there. And often when people will move my walker, I'll say to them, welcome to your future.
I bet that's helpful.
It gives them a good laugh, but yeah.
Well, I heard Elsie once, sharing kind of not just loving those bits that are kind of the highs of that roller coaster, but also loving the bits that are lows too. And just being okay with both of them. Just embracing that they both exist, and that you can be in a paradigm where you see, feeling coming from your thoughts, and being okay with that and being great with that. But you can also be happy that, you can live in that other paradigm as well. Happy with the fact that you can't see it sometimes.
Yeah.
And that was just so revelationary to me. Just, oh yeah, I can be okay with that too.
Yeah. And that's what, when I was mentioning about the relationship with the pain in the foot, when the times when I'm like really pissed off, it's just like not good timing, or what have you. And being okay with that too. And then, making the effort to go toward the compassion. And so it just really helps me to just, if you have someone you love that is having a serious pain problem, you really want to be kind to them and help them. And the expectations are not great. You really want for them to heal. So I try to do it, but it takes work, because your little self wants to be out there doing what you're usually doing. This is a real annoyance. But so it's okay to have that annoyance, but then it's how long do you want to stay there, And then coming back to, loving yourself as much as you would love someone else. Yeah.
If not more.
Yeah.
Susan, thank you so much for being with us. So how can people get in touch with you if they wanted to connect with you? You've mentioned your website. Go through that again so that we can...
Sure. Well, the podcast is livingwelltoday.ca. So there's definitely a contact page there. And I'd love to hear from people that, have some, that would love to be either on the show or have some ideas for topics. And my other website, susanwheelerhall.com. Email me at susan@susanwheelerhall.com. And I'm of course on Facebook, Twitter, and all those things. On Twitter, I'm Living Well Susan, because I'm living well.
That's clearly evident.
Yeah. Well, I really like the living well when unwell, because being unwell is a part of being well. So it's, having seen the both sides. And so I'm living well even though I have, a serious condition that I cope with.
Yeah.
But yeah, and not really cope with. I don't really like that word coping, but just live with it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But not in a way that's passive, like it is what it is, like, oh, well, you can't do anything. It is. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being there in some way helps you to, helps growth, helps you, I guess, be in a better place with it and therefore do more anyway. It's that being more useful.
Yeah. And I had a turning point, I think, when I was young. I might have been 20 or something. And a friend of mine was a school teacher, and she asked me to come and talk to her little kids at school about what it was like to be disabled. And so I was really nervous about this. So I went in, and it was so interesting because when I first came, I sat in a chair and the kids are all on the floor, right? There was like 5 feet away from me and the kids. And then, we talked and they asked questions, and I said, you ask anything and I'll answer. And so we did that. And then they had the recess, and after recess, they're like, whoa, they're like practically on top of me, because the barrier had definitely shifted. And the turning point was this one little girl said to me, okay, so if you didn't have a disability, what would you be? What would you like to be? Like, would you like to be a dancer, a singer? What would you like to be? And I thought about it, and I said, well, I'll have to think about that. And let me think on that, and I'll get back to you. So then at the end of the day, she asked again if I had thought about it. I had. And I said to her, well, you really taught me a really important lesson, because I found I couldn't even imagine what my life would be like without a disability. And that taught me that neither can they. They can't. So, people can't truly imagine what it's like to live with a disability.
No.
They can sympathize, empathize. They really can't, because I could not fathom. I could not answer her question. And then I found that was like, wow, that was a big turning point for me. That led me toward understanding that, nobody will understand my experience but me.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Part of whatever this is. It's been wonderful both to meet you and also to connect with you in the way that we have. And I've learned a lot from today. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Susan, until again, we'll say goodbye.
Okay.
Thanks again. Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Bye.